Trespassing in abandoned, homeless-infested buildings aren't exactly what first comes to mind when you imagine what you'd be looking forward to at the end of a long, hard week. But for me, urban exploration was my ideal way to spend a Saturday. Didn't really care too much about my job, it was always just a means to an end. Spent most of my time daydreaming about what I'd be getting up to at the weekend anyway, making mental checklists about the gear I'd need to bring or where I could explore next. Malls were always my favourite. I spent most of my childhood in or around them, and to explore the decaying corpses of what was pretty much the zeitgeist of 90s culture was both nostalgic and a fascinating experience. The poet in me would probably make some statement about them embodying the disposable nature of consumer culture, but I just think they look pretty cool. This was the destination for my weekend venture. Got to talking to some folk in the Urban X community about some small town malls. Took a while, but someone I knew eventually brought up one that checked all the boxes. Abandoned, no security, and within reasonable distance. I was getting excited just thinking about it, eager to have a look. A little too excited. For safety reasons I normally went with at least one other person, but unfortunately the only other people I knew that would be willing to go had already made plans that weekend, and frankly I just couldn't wait. When the weekend finally arrived, I was raring to go, had my gear packed and set the night before. All I had to do was take a couple of hours drive out to where the mall was and wait until nightfall. The mall happened to be a little bit out of town and wasn't exactly convenient to get to, but I imagine that probably had a hand in why it died. I arrived a little earlier than I had imagined. I decided to just park up in the vast empty parking lot outside and simply wait, watching this great behemoth of off-white concrete, broken windows and missing signage, silhouetted by the deep orange of the evening sky. And all that time I hadn't seen a single soul. I knew the guy mentioned that they never saw any security around the place, but I decided to play it safe regardless. If there was anyone there, they were doing a pretty good job of keeping themselves hidden. Besides, I'd rather be sitting in my own car than the back of one with a siren and a fresh criminal trespassing charge to my name. I watched the fading sun bathe the decaying buildings with a soft orange light. Then darkness covered the parking lot. I was ready to make my move. From the trunk I grabbed my camera, bag and jacket and made my way towards the empty mall. But as I approached the heavy double doors, I noticed a few strands of plastic tape littering the ground. Although heavily bleached by the sun, the two-tone pattern of black and yellow was still very much visible, along with the lettering, "Police line, do not cross." I picked up a piece and flipped it over. My brow furrowed as I gave the tape a long hard look. The guy that had told me about this place hadn't mentioned anything happening. All the googling I did for the place just came up with some articles announcing the place was closing and why. It was probably fake. You could buy almost anything on the internet nowadays anyway. Had to be some prank, or maybe something put up when the building first shut to keep the homeless out. Or people like me. I made sure the camera got a look at the tape before discarding it, moving on to the doors themselves. Two large, heavy metal things with the glass panels long since shattered and boarded up with cardboard. Around the lock, the metal was warped and scratched. Entry to the place once forced by something like a crowbar and left them no longer shutting completely. I gave the base of one a bit of a kick, causing it to slowly slide open and reveal the interior. Stepping inside the pitch black mall, I turned on the light of my torch, the yellow beam piercing through the darkness and illuminating the place. A few rodents scattered across the once white floor, now nothing but a dirty cream colour. I found the styrofoam panels covering the ceiling suffered a similar fate, yellowed and rotten, some missing entirely, allowing a peek into the rusted beams that supported them. Graffiti coated the walls, proudly displaying the names of those who'd vandalised them, while the glass storefronts were reduced to scattered shards lining the floor. The entrance spread out to a large atrium, the light of my torch illuminating the broken skylight, the remaining panels reflecting the light and casting it over the first floor of the mall above me. It was like a large circle that encompassed the outer ring of the room, the way up being an escalator that had already been long since salvaged for parts. The metal steps had either fallen away or been removed, its menacing metal innards exposed. I couldn't help but wince. I'd always been terrified of the thought of falling through one of them while it was moving, and seeing one bare like this only heightened the fear. Luckily, there was another way up, a more traditional staircase leading to the second floor. I ventured upwards and onto the floor above. Unfortunately, it seemed to be pretty much the same as the ground floor. Anything of value had long since been taken from the shops, The metal shutters either raised enough by a previous intruder to grant them entry, or never really had been lowered in the first place. The second floor seemed to extend off down another corridor, parallel to the one below. Yet, as I walked further down, the hairs on the back of my neck began to prickle and stand. Something was off. I found myself frozen, simply staring down the hallway with only my torch providing any light. There was a sudden and inexplicable weight on my shoulders. I couldn't even put my foot forward to take another step. Fear was beginning to grip my chest, a deep and primal terror from the back of my mind. I tried to work up the courage once more, summoning every ounce of will I had to push forward. Yet instead of putting one foot forward, it went straight back, and another, and another. My body marched me all the way back and out of the corridor. It was only then did the presence recede, and I found myself back in control once more. My lungs were burning, the muscles in my legs ached. I all but collapsed to the floor, desperately panting. I hadn't taken a single breath in my march backwards. I don't believe in the supernatural. I don't even believe in an afterlife. But at that moment, the bedrocks of my belief were shattered. I immediately tried to think of the rationale behind it. Carbon monoxide? Some kind of gas that was affecting my head? Maybe something in the back of my mind knew there was a danger and stopped me. I slowly got to my feet, dusted myself off, and double-checked my camera was still rolling. Maybe later I could go through the footage and see if I'd missed something. I turned around to leave and head back down the something behind me. Like footsteps on linoleum. Someone behind me. Right behind me. Don't turn around. Do not turn around. Every hair on my body stood up. I could hear breathing deep and low. Do not turn around. Goosebumps crawled along my arms. They weren't moving. They were waiting. Do not turn around. Do not turn around. Do not turn around. Do not turn around. I looked.
Boo.
I let out an awkward mix of scream and a shout as I whirled myself around, tripping over my own feet and winding back down onto the dusty floor as this woman stood before me and burst into a fit of laughter.
Oh, I got you good.
She laughed, almost bent double as I lay there, utterly bewildered. She wasn't homeless, those clothes were too clean. Not new either though, chinos and a hoodie. Backpack too. Looks like I wasn't the only one that decided to pay this place a visit. As soon as my heart stopped feeling as though it was about to burst out my chest, I gave an awkward "hey" as I tried to get myself up. I tried to stay mad at all this. I could have done something horrible by mistake. I could have swung around and hit her at the very least, but that laugh of hers, and that smile, it was the kind that just utterly disarms you. I couldn't help but join in after a second. We got to talking after laughing at the stupidity of it all. Told me her name was Rain. Turns out I was wrong in my initial assumptions about her. Well, technically. The mall was her home. Had been after her parents kicked her out for dropping out of college. Decided to live in a local mall instead of finding someplace more conventional. Always wanted to do it since she was a kid, and now she had the chance. When I pressed her on why she dropped out, she just mentioned something about how she felt she was never meant for that kind of education. Too much theory and not enough practical. It was a bit of a shame. She seemed smart enough to have probably done pretty well if she'd stuck at it. Witty too, if a little off the wall at times. I mean, you don't live in a mall and spook random folk that venture inside if you're not just a little bit eccentric. She showed me around the place, chatting in my ear all the while about how it used to be and why it died the way it did. It was rather mundane to be honest, but she told it all with such melancholy that it was hard not to get invested. It was just a case of dwindling customers causing the major shops to close, resulting in less customers and even more shops closing until all that was left was locally run ones, keeping the place afloat for a couple of years until finally the place had shut down for good. She had watched it all happen, this being her childhood hangout and all. I was surprised when she suddenly took my hand and offered to show me the rest of the place. Couldn't turn her down, could I? Especially with how her eyes seemed to light up at the very idea. For a place so dead, her liveliness was a nice contrast. She showed me the old fountain, long since drained and the cement beginning to crumble from neglect and vandalism. She told me she had her first kiss there. I went to ask her about that, but when I turned to speak, she gave me one. I was surprised, sure, we'd only spent a couple hours together, but if this was how she did things, well, I wasn't going to say no, but somehow it felt like the right thing to do at that time. So there we were, sharing a kiss in an abandoned shopping mall in front of a decaying fountain, illuminated solely by the light of my torch. Wasn't exactly the conventional idea of romance, but we weren't really conventional people. When she asked me to stay the night, I of course agreed, partly out of curiosity about how she managed to live in a place like this and still keep herself as clean as she did, but also because, well, as sappy as it sounded, I felt something between us. Something I hadn't felt in years, really. She led me by my hand into one of the maintenance corridors. I was expecting something along the lines of maybe a stockroom with a couple of chairs moved together, but where she brought me to instead took me by surprise. An employee lounge, or at least that's what it used to be. She had turned it into her own little paradise. It was about the size of maybe your average living room, but she used the space well. Along with keeping the old chairs and desks, she'd somehow gotten herself a bed in there. A double to boot. Salvaged posters and decorations from the various stores decorating the walls, giving the place a good deal of character. A jury-rigged lighting system kept the place illuminated. An icebox for food storage, and even a powered TV, which she admitted she'd had a little help in setting up. There was even a shower that she'd gotten working again. I was thoroughly impressed by it all. Something she seemed to notice, judging by the proud grin she gave, and like she had offered, we spent the night together. I awoke to the smell of dried blood and rot. My chest ached. I hacked and coughed, spluttering as I desperately tried to get to my feet. The room was pitch black. The lights were out. My phone was flashing, just within reach. I switched the camera flash. I wish I hadn't. The bed was gone. In its place simply a mattress, caked in blood, dried and blackened. The walls around it too. The room had aged years, paint was flaking, concrete cracked, the floor was damp, the air moist and foul. Each breath stung at my chest. I had to leave. The contents of the icebox rotten, mould sprawled the empty containers of food, spreading to the walls like black fingers stretching out. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. I had to leave. I frantically searched for my clothes, my bag, strewn haphazardly around the room. They were wet, cold, tainted somehow by the room. I harshly threw them on. I had to leave. I grabbed my bag and turned to leave.
I thought you said you'd stay.
Rain asked, right behind me. I could hear her breathing, heavy, laboured. Do not turn round. The weight was back. My legs were beginning to buckle. Do not turn round. I could barely get my foot off the ground to move. Do not turn round. Her breath quickened. I could feel it on the back of my neck, icy cold. Do not turn round. I took my first step. The air around me grew cold. I could see her breath. Do not turn around. Each step was agonising, like a nail through my foot with each step down. Do not turn around. I looked.